What's going on, ladies and gents, saints and ain'ts, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Shoe. I am your host, Dominic Smith, and today we have a very special episode. We got a good buddy of mine. It's a bit of a UCF reunion on this episode, or UCF meets Ohio State, but he is none other than Jason Bede. He covers UCF for 247 Sports. He's the publisher of UCF for 247 Sports. And if you're a Buccaneers fan, he's got you covered. He is the head of SI's branch covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we are going to talk some football today. Bede, what's going on with you, brother? I appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels good to talk with you again, and I'm excited to talk some recruiting.
Yeah, man, I never never pictured how we can kind of put UCF in an Ohio State podcast, but hey, man, listen, I think our professors have to be smiling in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, definitely shout out to pretty much all of them, because we had a lot of mutual professors and everything. So definitely always fun to talk about the hometown team. But yeah, man, let's get into it. So one question that, I ask recruits this all the time, but I try to, phrase it a little differently. If you had to, because you've been doing this for a few years, if you had to pick a 90s song to describe the madness of recruiting in this state, what would it be?
Oh, man. That's a tough one, just because I feel like there's so many good songs. That one caught me off guard. I was not ready for that, but I don't know. It's so interesting just because in the state of Florida, it's like, I feel like in Ohio, in the state of Ohio, like Cincinnati's definitely caught on the past couple of years, right? But you have Ohio State, like that's the main school, right? In Florida, you have FSU, Miami, and Florida, and those are the traditional powerhouses, right? And now UCF in the past, decade or so has come on and said, no, there's a big four. But then you add in for the South Florida kids, FIU, FAU, USF. They're even though they're smaller schools, like they could still compete just because it is South Florida and just because those kids want to stay home, right? It's like,
exactly.
Imagine Ohio University going after guys that Ohio State would want to go after. And you have this, like that can happen with FIU and FAU. Like when you get the right guy in there, Lane Kiffin, coaches like that, it's like, and you start winning ball games. It is an interesting aspect when you still have those powerhouses. It's like, imagine if there were 3 Ohio States in the state of Ohio, right? Yep. That's what you got with FSU, Miami, and Florida. So it's just, hectic and it's a lot of fun though.
You still didn't give me a song.
I can't think of a song
okay,
though. I don't.
Let's do 2000. Let's do 2000 to current.
Man. I'm just not as I don't know. I can't.
That is an interesting one. I would say.
I mean, I guess if you want to go 90s, I would say Thriller, just because it's a thrill, right? There's so many top athletes and recruits and NFL prospects that are, up and coming. It's like you look at this last NFL draft, like American Heritage from Miami had a damn good squad in 27. Like they had like sprint stars like Anthony Schwartz, and then multiple NFL draft picks on one high school team. I mean, not many high schools can say that across the country. So yeah, I don't know.
I'd said Crazy by Gnarls Barkley.
Yeah.
Seal Green.
That's a good one too. Yeah.
It is just, especially when the kids are like, they commit to a school outside of the state of Florida. And the biggest question that people have automatically is, oh my God, are they going to stick? Are they going to stick? Are they going to stick? And it's just like, I think so, because some people kind of want to venture out. But yeah, it's crazy. FIU's done a great job with what's his name? Butch Jones.
Butch
Davis, my bad. Butch Davis. They've done a great job in Miami. They're certainly going to come up, and we're going to talk about UCF a little later on and how they can kind of compete with Ohio State in a few of those battles. But, to get started, one question that people want to know is, what is recruiting like in the state of Florida? What are some of the things that you found interesting when you get a chance to talk to these kids, talk to these coaches? What's unique about the recruiting aspect in the state of Florida outside of the points that you just made?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is there's just so much talent within. I mean, Florida's a big state, obviously, but like you can go from town to town and probably find a baller, right? Like, even though you think of the Miamis and the Orlandos, like you can go to, Pensacola and probably find a dude,
Yeah.
just because they're playing football right there. You can go to Fort Myers and probably find some kids. Fort Walton Beach, you can go all St. Augustine and even down in Key West where I'm from.
Naples,
You can probably find some damn good football players because they just grew up playing the sport. They look at it as their way out. So I think there's just so much talent. And when this past recruiting cycle for UCF, previous coaching staff didn't put a focus on Florida, that's when you're like, that's a head scratcher for me. So I think the most interesting thing about Florida is it just has so much talent and so much legit talent where, you're pumping out NFL players every year. And I think another thing for me is a lot of these kids, and it probably happens everywhere, but especially in Florida, like you look at like the FHSAA, the Florida High School Association for Athletics, their state track meet was this past weekend. Like the Ohio State probably had a few guys that they're going after, if not committed right now, or in previous years competing that state track meet, right? Like you can go to a state track meet and see a pretty good football team, right?
Oh yeah.
Certain positions.
Oh yeah.
So I think the biggest thing on that point though is you could go to a basketball game and I just feel like there's so many athletes that play so many sports at such a high level. And maybe in other states it's only football for one kid. So I feel like these multi-sport athletes coming out of Florida that just give it their all year round. In Key West specifically, most of the offensive linemen are, they wrestle as well. So I remember a couple of years ago, 2 years ago now, maybe just over a year now, Key West had an offensive lineman, Patrick Barnett. He finished second in his weight class at States for wrestling, and he's on an offensive line at UCF. So I just feel like between the, square mile of talent throughout the state, combine that with the multi-sport athletes, it's just a really unique group of athletes throughout the entire state.
It's interesting to your points, especially Central Florida. It is just incredible how UCF didn't touch the talent in Central Florida. Like that was one of the things that always kind of amazed me, and just in the state in general. And to your point about the track meet, I remember being down in IMG a couple years ago, and the doggone 4x1 for American Heritage, they had Anthony Swartz and Tyson Campbell, on there. So, you definitely, from the speed aspect, Ohio State they picked up two commitments from, Central Florida. Both ran, well, not Central Florida, one from Tampa, one from South Florida, both under 10, 11 seconds in the 100. So,
they could stop playing football and go to the Olympics if they wanted to.
Pretty much. Or, you can really find something like these long jumpers are jumping 25, 26 feet. And then you go compare it to what they're jumping in college. It's like, wow, like this is stupid. Like this is crazy. I'll tell you what, the one thing that's kind of interesting to me, or that I found interesting, was that you have just a balance of kids who want to stay close to home, want to stay close to the brand, and then some who want to explore, some who want to get out, some who haven't, had the opportunities to, go on an airplane, and, they want to go
west of the Mississippi. Yeah.
Yeah. Go pretty much, go north of the Mason-Dixon line and get a chance to see snow and, this, that, and the other. That's one thing that it's kind of surprised me, because, there's such you talk to a lot of these kids, they'll say, I grew up, obviously you're going to have your fair share, at least watching closely the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Clemsons, and teams like that, the Georgias. But, they've been pretty solid to, the core of Central Florida. I'm sorry, the core of Florida, whether it's the Gators, whether it's the Seminoles, whether it's the Hurricanes, and then, some people, I hate to say this, but listen, if you got tickets to a UCF game, you're probably going to go. That may not be your team, but UCF was never thought of as like, I grew up watching, UCF and stuff like that.
Yeah, how many kids are saying UCF's their dream school?
Yeah, and
Nothing
so
against it. I mean, there probably are kids out there, but I don't hear that often.
yeah, like I don't hear people say, that's the school that's my dream school. USF, definitely don't hear that. That's the dream school and stuff like that. And things like that.
Yeah.
We're not USF fans on here just by association, but it's just, it is weird just to see like some of the schools, some of the kids are now like really, and I credit Scott Frost to be honest with you, because even then it was just like, wow, even some kids that maybe they got offers to some of the bigger schools, but they're will pretty much be at the bottom of the totem pole, if you will. It's like, okay, I could consider UCF. They got flashy uniforms, man. The sun, it's hot and everything there, and you have this offense, and then you have like the Mackenzie Miltons and stuff like that. Who, I want to get on talk about him a little later, but that kind of just opened things up, so to speak. And so now it's just weird, like seeing there are kids that, and I believe this is Gus and the staff that he's put together. He's pretty much put together an SEC staff that are like, ooh, okay, well, maybe I can stay home. Maybe I can get a little bit more playing time instead of, going out of state, to the Ohio States and stuff like that. And there's, a couple kids that, I hate to say it, but, it's more than just a name or a hat on the table at signing day. It's a serious consideration when it comes to, do I want to stay home or do I want to take my talents elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Scott Frost. I think that's the most interesting thing. UCF got a Nebraska transfer, Jaden Francois. He's returning back to the state of Florida. So it's like you mentioned seeing snow for the first time. Snow doesn't go away for many months. So it's like, I always found that interesting. I think, with the new one-time transfer, I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more, the new transfer rules, you see guys they go out, they're from Miami or they're from Orlando or wherever it may be in the state. They go to Indiana, they go to Nebraska, and they think they have to go Power 5. No, I'm not even talking the Blue Bloods. I'm talking they have to go Power 5 like a Vanderbilt or, one of those lesser successful Power 5 schools. They just think they have to go Power 5 because Power 5 must be better, right? And then they end up transferring back, whether it's UCF or FAU or FIU or wherever it may be in the state. And they get to play right away or play a couple years and develop an NFL player. It's like, damn, if only you had cut out the middleman, just started your career at UCF, you'd probably be in the NFL right now.
And I remember, Jaden Francois, he was an Ohio State target down there from South Florida. And yeah, it's kind of funny how, as Michael Scott would say, the turntables, and you have some of these kids, kind of coming back to UCF, who is just building this all-star roster. I mean, there were serious questions about UCF going into this year with all, the talent that, hit the portal, who, graduated, who got drafted and everything like that. And now you get the kid, the 5-star receiver from Notre Dame yesterday. They signed the kid today from, I think, Kennesaw State. You got, all these, SEC guys who, like you said, played here locally.
Mark Anthony Richards, from Auburn, Big Cat Bryant. You mentioned Jordan Johnson. Nate Craig Myers, Isaiah Bowser from Northwestern, Western Kentucky defensive tackle Ricky Barber. He was an all-conference USA player. I mean, Gus Malzahn kind of came in, evaluated the situation this spring, and he's added 9 transfers. I mean, how many programs can even say they've added 3 or 4? They've added 9, and some of those guys will be walking on, obviously, just because, there's only so many scholarship spots. But he's gone in and looked at what he has and addressed the needs in the transfer portal. And, a lot of those guys, I think a guy like Jordan Johnson, maybe he was a little overwhelmed in the classroom at Notre Dame. He didn't play his freshman season. I know Brian Kelly likes, playing more veteran receivers that I've read so far past couple of days. he'll be able to play right away. I mean,
Oh yeah.
easily. He's got the talent to be a number one wide receiver at a Power 5 school, let alone UCF. So I think when you add in the SEC coaching staff that you mentioned with Gus Malzahn and Travis Williams and David Gibbs and some of these other guys, I think when UCF fans saw Gus Malzahn come in, it was like, okay, we could probably win 7 or 8 games, and what he's done this off season throughout the training and the transfer portal, and they're not done in the transfer portal, by the way. I think people are like, okay, maybe they can get 10, 11 games, maybe compete for a conference championship. So he's on a fast track to success, I think.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's switch gears just to talk about, and we touched on it briefly before the show, about a couple targets that I feel that, are really high on Ohio State, and Ohio State's extremely high on them, but UCF might have something to say. When you talk about the general landscape of recruiting, what Gus is doing, his track record, I mean, it's not as if Auburn was finishing outside of the top 20 in recruiting. Auburn's class were in the top 10, consistently year in and year out. Do you think that the presence of UCF and Gus Malzahn and his staff, the energy that he brings, could that potentially kind of shut the door for teams like Ohio State to come in and get kids? Because now when you're looking at it and you have, your sources, you have ears and, your foot in the door when it comes to UCF, the best of them all that cover them, that there's a lot of kids, a lot of high profile kids who are now thinking about, making their way up to Orlando. So could this be a future issue? And by future, I mean sooner rather than later, especially if they produce on the field.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, I think what's so interesting about UCF recruiting the past few years, even with Scott Frost and Josh Heupel and stuff, whenever you had a 4-star sign to UCF, you perfect Cordarian Richardson, Scott Frost, I think second recruiting class, 4-star, kind of comes out of nowhere, signs with UCF on National Signing Day. He was a bust. I mean, he transferred to Texas A&M, and I don't know where he is now. He just didn't work out at UCF. A bust for UCF, I should say. Nothing against him, but traditionally when UCF signed a 4-star, it's a signing day surprise, right? They were in contact here and there, but they might have been dropped by a Power 5 program last minute. I got to sign somewhere. Okay, UCF works for me. With Gus, I mean, you look at this first weekend in June, the biggest name on the official visit list, Jeremiah Alexander, number 1 defensive end in the country, multiple 4, 5-star. I mean, he's a 5-star, but multiple 4-stars coming through. Nick Jordan, linebacker out of Georgia, and Malachi Madison and Jordan Phillips out of Ocoee. Some of these other Florida guys that are coming through, not just June 11th, but every weekend in June there's a 4-star on campus.
Exactly.
That I don't think has ever happened before. Like, it's not that often where UCF gets involved with a 4-star this early in the process. I mean, they might always be talking to them, but they don't take official visits in June. And now I know the pandemic has been weird and no one's been on campus for over a year, but the interesting thing about this recruiting class so far is how early on it's you're talking to these 4-stars, and the fact that they're even having conversations with 5-stars and getting some of these guys, like I mentioned, Jeremiah Alexander on campus for 5. He's still planning out official visits, but UCF's the only one he's got set up for a date right now. Yeah. Now he's going to go visit Alabama and Clemson and those other schools, but that's the one set in stone right now. I don't think UCF's ever been able to say that in June. So going back to, the fact that Gus Malzahn hasn't even won a game yet. Imagine what he can do with a 12-0 season, conference championship, New Year's Six Bowl, multiple New Year's Six Bowls. Potentially, let me say this right now for Ohio State fans, the college football playoff is expanding. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Let me be really clear about that. So imagine if UCF can crash the party and make an expanded playoff, or even somehow, I don't think it's possible, but making the current playoff. I think when you have a coach like Gus Malzahn, and he has winning under his belt, and a recruiter like Travis Williams, absolutely that could become a problem for Ohio State and Michigan and some of these other out-of-state programs. So I don't know right away, probably not, right? You still got to win football games, and but I think if they're able to get a really solid class, maybe 1, 2 4-stars. Then next year, you win your conference championship. You make it to a New Year's Six Bowl, whether it's the Peach Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl, whatever. Win or lose, I think that I'm excited to see next year's recruiting class and who he gets on campus for official visits. I mean, he's only been here for like 4 or 5 months. He's got 5 stars coming. He's got a couple 4 stars coming on the campus next month. So, imagine with games under his belt, what that's going to be like.
I mean, when Urban Meyer came to Ohio State, just the immediacy of just being able to get guys and get them on campus. But as far as from a group of 5 school, I've never seen that. It's been very interesting to see. And I think that's what makes like the class of 2023 so interesting, because I think that if UCF has a good season, and we're going to get to playoff expansion in just a second, but it'll be interesting to see, like, if it would be crazy. Somebody's committed to a school like Ohio State, and then all of a sudden you find out they're taking an official to UCF. Because I'll be honest, I've never been to the Horseshoe, but, I've been to UCF, and I don't think that the two compare and everything, even though it gets crazy in UCF when it gets rocking. But it's just, I never thought, and Ohio State has a strong recruiter. They have strong ties down here. Tony Alford's one of the best in the game, Brian Hartline. And so it's just so weird to me. I never thought that I would say I'm actually looking forward to seeing Tony Alford versus like Travis Williams and Ryan Day versus Gus Malzahn on the recruiting trail, for an athlete. So like I said, was the most interesting thing to me, because, and even not just Ohio State, Alabama has a good foot in here. And I think the biggest thing is Alabama, Ohio State, these schools, they're going to get at least one person. At the very least, they're going to get at least one. They're going to snag at least one. But just to be able to, continue to, dig in the well and continue to, have these pipelines, it's like, is this the guy that could come in sooner rather than later that could say, hey, we're crashing the party a little bit? And so I really think that's interesting.
And I think the interesting thing is it only takes one guy. Right. Yeah. Oh, UCF never had. I mean, they had 5-star transfers, right? Like Jordan Johnson was a 5-star for Rivals, 4-star on 24/7 Sports.
Yeah,
really highly recruited player. So he's a transfer, right? And he's 2020 class, so recent. It's a pretty accurate rating, right? I think within Gus Malzahn's time, whether it's 7 years, 10 years, whatever, he said he wants to stay here for the long haul. I mean, he's the interesting thing about Gus is he doesn't have to leave for that big job because he's already had that big job.
Right.
So I think within Gus Malzahn's tenure at UCF, I do believe he'll sign the first 5-star UCF. Just if the success on the field, if you add in the success on the field, and you get 2 4-stars your first class, maybe 2 4-stars next year, I mean even just one. I think it just takes one guy to get the ball rolling, and in addition to in multiple years, winning a lot. that's the biggest thing, right? You got to win the football games.
Oh yeah, it's like I said. I know Buckeye fans, may listen to this like, oh my God, listen to this, and be like, oh my goodness gracious, is this? I don't think it's going to end the dynasty of getting kids in Florida. I just think maybe
I don't think it's going to happen every recruiting cycle. No. But I think if the winning happens on the field, you have Gus Malzahn, and look, Travis Williams probably doesn't stay here for 3 or 4 years, right? No more than that, just because he's up and coming. He's going to be a head coach. Gus said that. Tim Harris Jr. is going to be a head coach. GJ Kinney's probably going to be a head coach eventually. 4 or 5 years, who knows what the stats going to look like. But I do feel like down the line, I think those blue blood programs across the country are always going to be able to come in and kind of snag who they want. But I think it's going to be a little bit harder than it used to be before.
Oh, yeah. And that's why I say I think that it's just going to be – I think it's going to be fun. I'm actually looking forward to it, because you look at elite recruiters on both ends. Ohio State has one of the best recruiting staffs, and they're consistently multiple recruiters, whether it's Day, Coombs, Alford, Heartline, they're ranked in the top 10 of the 247 recruiting list. And so it'll be fun to kind of see how, those matchups in recruiting, take place over the years. But I wanted to switch gears back to our time at UCF. What was one of the crazier moments in journalism school that you remember?
Oh, and this is probably a sore spot for UCF, but definitely when Dale Whitaker resigned.
Yeah.
I remember that morning. I mean, I'm talking just journalism school in general. I can tell you another sports story just so we can stay on the sports topic, but definitely when UCF's president Dale Whitaker resigned. I remember in the morning there was a Florida Politico report that it might be happening, and then it was like I was sitting in the hallway outside the newsroom, and I had my Twitter notifications on and emails set and all that stuff, and he started tweeting. And I don't remember who I was sitting with, but I just turned and said, Dale Whitaker's tweeting. And I ran in the newsroom and said, Dale Whitaker's resigning. And covering that, the multiple month investigation, all that, that was one of the crazier moments in my time at UCF Journalism School. Covering UCF, however, man, it's got to be, even though UCF fans might not love Josh Heupel anymore, I mean, outside of the Peach Bowl, right? That's just a crazy, that whole game, that whole season is real special for me, having to able to cover a team like that. But I think Josh Heupel's first season on the road at Memphis, they were down multiple touchdowns at halftime. It was raining at Memphis.
Yeah.
That's when Taj McGowan broke free for like a 40-yard touchdown. Like I think it was like 4th and 1 on their own, like 30 or 40, and he just broke free for like a long run. That's the game when Mackenzie Milton had the play where it was called the fly in Hawaii, and he flipped over, and they came back and won that game. And this is what says so much about the previous coaching staff. After the game, UCF's defense didn't give up any points in the second half, and you have this tremendous offensive effort to come back and win on the road, retaining that, that momentum and that undefeated season. We asked Josh Heupel, what about the defense was, change? And he's like, you're going to have to talk to Randy Shannon about that. And that said so much about, I was just like sitting there like, man, come on, dude, But I think moments like that, I mean, obviously non-football for me, traveling to South Carolina, watching UCF Duke and Aubrey Dawkins.
I'm going to bring that up in a minute.
I think there's just so many great moments. I mean, we were so lucky where my freshman season was Scott Frost's first year. So I got to go and cover, the Peach Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, March Madness, just some really historic moments and being able to cover some historic teams. The Peach Bowl was just so special.
I'm not going to lie to you. I remember you being, somebody's closing the door, but I remember you walking in the newsroom. We were just having a high old time. I remember Chick-fil-A. I had like 2 pieces of chicken or 2 chicken sandwiches, and you come in, then Whitaker's resigning. Like, what? And then it was stock market dropped, and everybody just rushing. News start or not or whatever they were. They started doing like a special, like this is breaking news and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And like I remember, like, oh my goodness, like is this happening? And you were like the first person. You were there at the meeting. We went to the board of trustees thing whenever they had it.
They had to confirm. Well, they had to confirm the resignation, and it was like so emotional because his daughter spoke and his wife spoke, and then after that meeting, it was just like such a dark day on campus, I feel like.
Oh my gosh, it was like it was crazy. The one that got me, and like I said, you were there. I have felt pain when Ohio State lost to Clemson in 2019. That was painful. But as far as something that legitimately just about brought tears to my eyes is that ending of that UCF Duke game. Yeah. When I say that hurt my soul.
Yeah, it stings still. I mean, it's like, man, watching the replays, and I was there, like you said, I was there. I was on the court, I was sitting on the floor, and I was taking photos of the moment, and it was just, oh man, it's one of the ultimate what ifs. I mean, right? It's like in the past decade, you have Gordon Hayward's. Isn't it funny? It's always Duke, right? Aubrey Dawkins almost tips and I know Butler and Duke was a national championship game, but Aubrey Dawkins' tip almost goes in, let alone BJ Taylor's layup. And then, almost a decade earlier, Gordon Hayward almost hits this ridiculous half-court shot that rims out. And these incredible what-if shots,
Crazy.
It hurts.
What were you say? What's the best place to eat on campus? Best and the worst. Best and the worst.
The best place to eat on campus, like on campus, man. I mean, for me personally, like I'm not talking necessarily about the food, but just the atmosphere and the ability to like sit somewhere is probably the on-campus Chili's in the Union. I like going there. I think that's really underrated. Where maybe the food's not the best, right? Or and you can get Chili's wherever, right? But I think in terms of a place where you can like escape into the AC for a little bit, and if you want to drink alcohol, you can do that as well. So I think that for me is one of the best spots. The worst place, another new spot is the expanded library. I don't know if the last time you were on campus, but the expanded library has, and the expansion of the student union as well has a really good Starbucks and a great location. Man, the worst place on campus, I don't know. I feel like any of those places to the left of CF or to the left of the District Financial Arena, like that weird.
Ooh. Really?
Like the Domino's there, and I don't know. It was just, I don't know.
Those Subway cookies hit differently when it's 12 o'clock and you have to, UCF is massive, so you have to pretty much walk 2 miles to get to your next.
That's what I'm saying. It's so far though. Like it's not close to anything. Like,
okay,
I've just never gone over. It's like I'm hungry. Let me go walk a mile. Like,
that's fair. That's fair. And this is probably going to be the lead in for the show because it's so true. Mine, oh man, this is going to be the best place was Smoothie King.
Yeah, that place is always it felt the most consistent, I feel like.
Yeah, Smoothie King was the best. Smoothie King and Einstein's. The one
Einstein's was good. What I loved was, I mean, I'm not talking about one specific food truck, but the food trucks they added about halfway through my time there, just to have different.
Oh yeah.
Because like you're going there for like multiple years, it's like, all right, well, there's always Chick-fil-A, right? But like when they had the food trucks just on and off, you had different options on Memory Mall, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
The Burger U chicken tenders, undefeated with the honey mustard they got.
Yeah, I will get
honey mustard hits.
There is the level of sweetness. I wasn't a fan as much of their burgers. But the fries were suspect too. But they had like this cookie. It was like goodness gracious. It was like this. It was a Reese's. No, it was a Hershey's Kisses and this soft chocolate chip cookie. Man, when I tell you that. And a plate of those chicken tenders with the honey mustard is literally why I gained like 30 pounds when I was there. Like even walking, because people don't understand, like you have to walk. This is at the back of campus. So journalism building is like, I don't even get all the way like over to the left side. Not even in the front, it's in the middle. And so when football season is going on in the press conferences, if you don't have a car, even if you do have a car, because the parking is weird, you have to walk like all the way back there, just to, memories.
Yeah, I think when we were talking with Gus Malzahn, like, at the start of spring, I guess he had been on campus for about a month. We asked him, like, what thing has stood out to him? And he was staying at the on-campus hotel, which is fairly new. That's at the front of campus, right? And he said, I have to ask, am I still on campus? Like, even though he's a mile, like, if you go around in the circle, you're still a mile away. And he was just, like, shocked at how big campus is. I feel like people who haven't been to UCF's campus, like, that was one thing that I loved. It was, like, even though it was so big, it was so hard to get lost because it was a circle.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just a ginormous, just huge circle. And if you get lost in the middle, you're on Memory Mall. So you're fine.
Yeah, exactly.
I will say this, anybody who's going to a UCF game, make sure you make your way to Townhouse. It's about 5 miles away over in Oviedo. Best French toast, some of the best French toast you ever have. But let's wrap this thing up with a bow. So college playoff expansion is happening. It is happening. Realistically speaking, when you look at the group of five, we're talking UCF. I think with the additions, they have to be at the forefront. Cincinnati was love Luke Fickell, but he was a couple plays away, better managed plays away from beating Georgia. I guess you could say Boise State, just from a tradition standpoint. Who has the best chance of beating an Ohio State, and can it be done? Especially when you look at the format. The format, at least from what I've seen, somebody UCF or somebody Cincinnati, you see Cincinnati, it wouldn't be a problem. And I do not think that they would say Cincinnati go play Ohio State because
they wouldn't do
Ohio.
that. Ohio State would say no.
Yeah, exactly. It's not, it would be a good game, but I think somebody, and this is what I like about the expansion, somebody's going to have to cross that Mason-Dixon line to come up to the north and play in the snow. That's what I'm looking forward to. Can UCF be that team to take that next step and put the group of five on the map? The way that Boise State, they always kind of fell short. But the way that Boise State carried that banner, can UCF be the team to do it, and why? Can they beat an Ohio State?
Oh, I think so. I mean, you look at first, we're talking just the most recent Fiesta Bowl, but the first Fiesta Bowl, UCF played Baylor. They were the biggest underdog, and they put up 52 points on a Baylor team. And then they, take care of business against Gus Malzahn and Auburn. Even though they didn't beat LSU in the Fiesta Bowl, the second Fiesta Bowl for UCF, they still put up a pretty good fight and, hung in there. And I know they lost by 8, but they were up 13-3 at one point, and then things kind of fell apart, but it was competitive. Yeah. I think, the one thing I hate is when Power 5 fans always say, well, if you were in our conference, you wouldn't be able to play week to week Power 5 teams. And it's like, you don't even know. It's like, how do you even know? I mean, it's like, that's such a bold assumption. So yeah. I think, you look at the American Athletic Conference, I know they have the Power 6, and I don't particularly love that. But you look at like some of these, Bill Connolly, ESPN, he has great ratings, and Phil Steele has these ratings that show that the American was better than the ACC this past, I think, last year or 2 years ago. So I think the American is definitely the best of the group of 5. So if I had to pick a team, it would be from the American. No disrespect to Boise State. Maybe if they had a really special season, sure. But I think from a conference overhaul, it's going to be from an American team. That will be the first group of 5 team to be in the playoff. And I think if UCF stays on the path that it's on, it has a special quarterback like Dylan Gabriel, or even down the line. Sure, absolutely. I think it's possible. It's why you play the game, right? I think everyone thought, when Adrian Killen said the SEC's never seen speed like ours, everyone was like, dude, come on. And then they, he did his thing, right? And they beat Auburn. So I think it would take a perfect game, right? And if you play 10 of them, Ohio State probably wins 7 or 8 of them, but that's not how you play football, right?
He's got to win once. And let me say this.
Exactly.
Let me say this about Killens. He said that, but remember, he got dropped on his neck by Derek Brown.
He did. He did.
He still did. Here's the way I look at it. And I try to say this as we wrap up with immense perspective. I think that, and I say this from covering UCF and being out there and having an understanding about it, and even some of the other teams like Cincinnati and Memphis, if you put them in certain conferences, I don't want to say you can, I think UCF would, I'll be honest, I think they would struggle in the Big Ten from the standpoint of the weather, because, you're playing in snow, that's kind of different. But I think if you put Cincinnati in the Big Ten, listen, I think that Cincinnati team last year could have beaten Nebraska. I think they could have beaten Purdue. I think they could have, Northwestern is.
You look at what UCF did to Georgia Tech. You put UCF in the ACC, they might not be Clemson, or maybe North Carolina would be a good game. We didn't get to see that due to the pandemic, but they definitely would have held them close, and I think they probably finished in the top half of the ACC, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're beating some of the,
I
Wake Forest and the Georgia
oh, yeah.
Techs and FSU's and
I think some of these teams, and the problem is in some conferences, is top heavy. SEC.
yeah.
SEC, for example. SEC, I don't care what you say. Florida, respectable. Georgia, respectable. That conference is carried by Alabama. When Alabama won the national championship, all I saw was SEC. And I'm like, no, it's just Alabama.
It's just Alabama.
It's just Alabama. The Big Ten is just Ohio State. Indiana's on the come up. They got a lot of transfers. These conferences are very, very top heavy. You put a Memphis, you put a UCF, you put UCF in the ACC. I think within 2 years that they can compete for an ACC title, or at least make it competitive. Because I think if UCF can get these kids and they can develop, I still would love to see UCF Miami. Teams,
and not just from a recruiting standpoint, but from a financial standpoint. I don't think people really understand TV contracts because UCF gets maybe in the new deal, I don't know exactly what it is. I think it's like $7 million per team. In the Big Ten and the ACC and the SEC, it's like $20 million per team. So I think it was George O'Leary maybe, or maybe I'm mixing up with the Mike Bianchi column that he quoted George O'Leary. I don't know. It was either George O'Leary or Mike Bianchi, old white guy, right? He would always say, I think it was George. He would always call those Vanderbilt schools check collectors, right? They're just there to collect a check and say they're in the SEC or the ACC in a Power Pack conference. And imagine you look at what UCF's done. They're doing the most with the least. Imagine if they had some of that most on the other side of it, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's remarkable what they're able to do with so much less funding, and they're still putting out NFL draft picks and competing for conference championships and playing in these big national TV games and getting the ratings and pulling in the recruits. And now they're starting to really get a head coach like Gus Malzahn come in. It's going to be exciting to see what happens.
I'm looking forward to it. I love UCF, love the AAC. They play some football down there. Wish they got more respect. I want to see them in the playoff. I want to see them do well in the playoff. I just don't think they can hang with the Buckeyes, and I know it'll be interesting. Like I said, if they're on a neutral field, you just have to win once. But if it's that time, I know you're rolling with UCF. I got to roll with the Buckeyes. But listen, brother, I appreciate you coming on the show, you dropping knowledge and wisdom, and hopefully our audience got a better understanding of Florida football, the recruiting, the nuances, and how schools like UCF can, give Ohio State some headaches. Definitely hope all of our professors and those, if they watch the show, definitely appreciate all that they've done. It's always fun to have a UCF reunion. As always, if you're looking to sponsor the show, hit me up at DominiqueSmith77@gmail.com. Check out Buckeye Scoop for more intel. Check out, is it SI.com, Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Yeah, allbucks.com for Tampa Bay Bucks coverage and Knights 24/7 for UCF coverage. It should be a great month next month in June, and should be a really good season next year.
The real bead on Twitter, right?
Yep.
Make sure
at the real beady on Twitter.
At the real beady on Twitter. Make sure you give him a follow. But that's going to conclude this episode. It's been real. We'll see you next time on Beyond the Shoe.